So what happens when a tiny, almost forgotten border dispute suddenly becomes the main event for a global power struggle? Well, we're about to find out how a local conflict can just explode into this high-stakes showdown between the world's biggest superpowers.
Okay, picture this. The year is 2025, and a conflict that's been simmering for ages between Thailand and Cambodia, it just blew up. But this isn't just about some old temples or dusty maps. No, this is the new great game, and believe me, Southeast Asia has become the chessboard.
And this quote from 9-Line, it absolutely nails it. I mean, that sounds dangerously familiar, right? It really echoes the Cold War. So the real question is, are we just watching history repeat itself?
All right, to really get what's happening with this fire on the border, we've got to look at the bigger forces that are fanning the flames. So let's zoom out a bit and talk about this new superpower showdown.
So here you can see the two competing strategies, plain as day. On one side, you've got the US playing a classic security game, right? They're building up military alliances like the Cobra Gold exercises with Thailand, all to keep China in check. But China, they're playing a completely different game, an economic one. They're using their massive Belt and Road initiative to pull countries like Cambodia into their orbit. It's military power versus economic muscle. You've got two titans with totally different playbooks.
Okay, so now let's zoom in. We're going from that 30,000-foot view of the great powers right down to the ground to the actual flashpoint, that contested and really volatile border between Cambodia and Thailand.
And just look how fast this all spiraled out of control. So late July 2025, a brutal 5-day war just erupts. Then a ceasefire is kind of hastily patched together. A few months later, we get the Kuala Lumpur Peace Accord. And for a second, there's a bit of hope. But then, barely a month after that, the whole thing just collapses. This crazy cycle of violence and then diplomacy and then back to violence, it just shows you how incredibly fragile the whole situation really was.
And the human cost? Wow, it was absolutely staggering. We're talking more than 300,000 people forced to flee their homes in just 5 days of fighting. This wasn't some distant political game, you know? It had devastating real-world consequences for ordinary people who were just caught in the middle.
And yeah, this wasn't a fight with old rifles and dusty equipment. The hardware here tells a story all its own. So let's take a look at the actual weapons that turned this border skirmish into a modern, high-tech proxy war.
So on the Thai side, you've got the Israeli-made Atmos 2000. It's this really sophisticated truck-mounted howitzer that's known for being super precise. And then, on the Cambodian side, you have the Chinese PHL-03. This thing is a fearsome multiple rocket launcher, and it's designed for one thing: long-range saturation fire. I mean, you can already see the totally different military philosophies just by looking at their main artillery.
Okay, let's break it down. The ATMOs fires a 155mm shell, which is pretty standard. The PHL-3, on the other hand, is launching these massive 300mm rockets. But the number that really matters here is the range. The ATMOs can hit targets just over 40 kilometers away. Pretty good. But the PHL-3, it can reach out to 130 kilometers. That is a massive difference.
And this chart right here just makes that difference crystal clear. It's not even close. Cambodia, backed by Chinese tech, had an artillery system that could outrange its rival by more than 3-to-1. A capability like that, well, it completely changes the dynamic of a border conflict.
So you might be thinking, how did this imbalance even happen? Especially when you look at the money, right? Thailand's defense budget is nearly 7 times bigger than Cambodia's. Well, the answer isn't about how much you spend, it's about how you spend it. It's all about strategy.
And this table, it really tells the rest of the story. Thailand is ranked 25th in the world militarily. They have a powerful conventional army with dozens of fighter jets, even a helicopter carrier. Cambodia, they're ranked 95th. They have none of that stuff. But look at that last line: rocket projectors. Cambodia has a staggering 463 of them. See, they knew they couldn't compete head-on, symmetrically. So instead, they invested in an asymmetric advantage: long-range rocket artillery, all supplied by their superpower patron.
So with the fighting escalating and these powerful proxy weapons in play, the international community basically had to step in. And the intervention? It came from a very direct and maybe unexpected source.
Yeah, this wasn't about some heartfelt appeal to international law. President Donald Trump used his signature tool, economic force. He threatened both countries with a crippling 36% tariff on their exports. Suddenly, making a peace deal wasn't just a good idea, it was an economic necessity. This was a purely transactional approach to diplomacy, through and through.
And you know what? It actually worked, at least at first. The result was the Kuala Lumpur Peace Accord, and the terms look pretty comprehensive. Get ASEAN observers in there, pull back all the heavy weapons from the border, do some joint demining, even restore full diplomatic relations. On paper, it was a solid plan for de-escalation. But this high-profile deal, the one witnessed by the U.S. president himself, it just didn't last. So why? Why did it all fall apart so incredibly quickly?
Okay, here's the chain of events. The accord gets signed on October 26th. Just 2 weeks later, 2 weeks, on November 10th, some Thai soldiers get injured by a landmine. Thailand immediately points the finger at Cambodia and suspends the deal. Less than a month after that, the ceasefire completely collapses and fighting starts again. The path from peace back to war was just incredibly short. You know, in the end, that piece of paper just couldn't overcome the decades of deep-seated mistrust between them. That landmine incident, whether it was an accident or on purpose, was all the excuse needed to shatter that fragile peace. The external pressure got them to the negotiating table for sure, but it couldn't force them to actually trust each other.
So what does all this mean for the bigger picture? Well, this whole failed peace process exposed some really serious cracks in the stability of Southeast Asia. Let's look at the key takeaways from this whole mess.
First off, it really showed the limits of ASEAN, the regional bloc, in solving its own internal conflicts. Second, it was a pretty stark reminder that peace deals forced by outside powers can be incredibly fragile. Third, it highlighted a huge risk to all of us because instability in this region threatens some of the most critical shipping lanes in the world. And finally, it put a spotlight on this delicate balancing act that smaller nations have to perform. They're walking this tightrope, right? Accepting Chinese support but also trying to keep channels open to the US. It's a strategy that experts call hedging.
And all of this leaves us with one final, really critical question. As these local disputes increasingly become the arenas for superpower competition, is Southeast Asia just destined to be a permanent chessboard for games played by Washington and Beijing? The events of 2025, well, they suggest it's a very real and, frankly, a very dangerous possibility.